May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts bring us calm in the midst of life's storms. With your help, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. In the time of Jesus and his disciples, boats were the fastest mode of transportation. Given the choice between walking to a town on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, hitching a ride on an available animal, or riding a boat straight across as a crow would fly, the boat was hands down the best way to get to the other side. Fast forward to 2018, and the airplane is our modern boat. Our range of travel has broadened and now spans the entire globe because of these sky shuttles. In the past month, I have spent far more time in the air than is my norm. And anyone who knows me well can tell you that while airplanes are indeed our fastest mode of transportation, they are not my favorite. I do just fine when we hit our smooth cruising altitude, but don't expect me to be your chatty, friendly neighbor during takeoff or landing. Twice this past month, I have related far too well to the disciples being tossed around violently in a boat in the midst of the storms at sea. Twice, I have been in a plane that has suddenly pulled up and aborted a landing. 2 times in 1 month. I have felt my stomach lurch as I watched the approaching landscape drop quickly into the distance with no warning. Later explanations by each captain, first of ground control misgauging the path of a nearby Airbus, second, avoiding a patch of volatile and unpredictable air, did little to calm my nerves or loosen my grip on the handrails of my seat. Let's just say that I was not amused. Yes, I was grateful for the safety precautions of our pilots. They each successfully navigated us through tricky conditions and eventually brought us safely to the other side. And it is, after all, a great privilege to be on an airplane in the first place. But at the same time, had Jesus been in the seat next to me, I would have been the first to echo the sentiments of the disciples. I would have been the first to give Jesus a piece of my mind in those scary moments. Jesus, do you not care that we're perishing here? Wake up and do something. I cannot point my finger at the disciples without first examining my own patterns in times of fear. I think of myself as a woman of faith, but I'll be the first to admit that the animal instincts of self-preservation often override my deep and abiding trust in Jesus. Fact of the matter is that we all face these moments of fear. We all face storms, big and small, long and short. Oftentimes we find ourselves looking at several storm fronts at the same time coming at us from different directions. Jesus does not promise us smooth sailing. The good news, the gospel message, is not all rainbows and butterflies. Prosperity gospel preachers can only take us so far before a tragedy strikes that rocks our faith to the very core. Storms happen. Storms happen to good people. Storms happen even when we choose to put ourselves in the boat with Jesus. The cross has never been about avoiding storms. The cross is instead a reminder that Jesus does know our suffering, and Jesus does care when we are perishing. The cross is a reminder that Jesus is willing to suffer with us and for us, and will remain in the boat alongside us, come what may. When I read this portion of Mark's gospel, I don't hear Jesus coming out of his deep sleep, asking why the disciples didn't wake him up earlier so that he could stop the storm before the waves got so big. What I hear is Jesus asking the disciples why they lost their trust in the midst of the pounding waves. Jesus says to the sea, "Peace, be still." And in that moment, I hear him commanding us to do the same. Far too often, when the storms rage around us, we choose to rage with it. We choose to thrash around, to pound our fists, and to turn on one another. We want something to blame. We worry that others don't notice that we are being swallowed by the waves. We search for someone to point our anger at in our time of fear. We're human. It's natural. And Jesus says, "Peace, be still." Finding peace in moments of chaos does not come naturally to us. It takes trust, it takes patience, and it takes humility. First, we must trust that Jesus is with us and that he cares for us. Trusting comes more easily when the waters are calm. But as the storms build and we get tossed to and fro, it becomes harder to feel his presence. And he may at sometimes feel as if to be asleep. It takes patience to weather the storm. Even with Jesus by our side, as much as we want him to miraculously put an end to the turbulent winds and the waters, Jesus asks us to trust instead that we will have the strength to make it through. Even in times of gravest danger, Jesus asks us to trust that death will not get the final word, but rather God's eternal and heavenly kingdom. It takes humility. Humility to know that we are not always in control of everything, that we do not always have the power to fix all the storms we face here on earth. I can only imagine that every disciple in the boat with Jesus had a different take on what needed to happen first in order to save themselves. James and John might have been barking at the others to grab buckets and start bailing water as fast as they could, while Peter and Andrew might have been arguing that they should wake up Jesus first instead. They all had the same goal, to make it safely through the storm. But I'm sure at some point, they had to be humble enough to listen to each other in order to work together and figure out how exactly to make that happen. I can even picture them all saying, "I told you so," when Jesus calmed the storm. The first camp nodding when Jesus spoke to the storm and stopped it. And the second camp fist pumping when Jesus asked why they had lost their trust. It takes humility to listen to each other and to work together when the going gets rough. And Jesus says to the raging sea and to our souls, "Peace, be still." We all have storms that we are facing. My prayer is that with trust, patience, and humility, we can still our souls and allow God's peace that passes all understanding to guide us through the waves and hold us together safely in the boat. Amen.